This
maintained
conference will
by
now be recorded.
Okay, so metadata is an internal repository maintained by MicroStrategy, correct? Whatever activity that you do, whatever objects that you create, every information gets recorded in the metadata, correct? So now in order to create that repository, and whenever we say repository, correct, what it needs, it needs tables and columns so that it can hold the required information. So whenever we say configuring metadata, we need to make sure that the required metadata tables have been created. I can select any database for the metadata. It could be Oracle, Teradata, Redis, SQL Server, anything. But for our training standpoint, I'm going to use Microsoft Access as my database. Okay. Other thing that you need to understand is whenever you want your MicroStrategy to interact with database. See, my metadata resides in database. Definitely. So in order to have your MicroStrategy connect with your required database, it has to go through as something called as Odbc. It's a Microsoft product, definitely. It's a component, not a product. It's a component. Odbc stands for Open Database Connection. So what happens? You will create an Odbc with all the database details, like what type of database you are using, what are the credentials, and so on. And once you're done with the Odbc, on top of this, you will configure the metadata. So MicroStrategy talks to Odbc, and Odbc will have all the details related to the required database. Okay, I'll show you what exactly I'm trying to say. So Odbc will have the information about the database. Okay, and through this, MicroStrategy will do all the communication. Okay, so let's take it step by step. So in order to just get started, I need a blank schema. Okay, I will create a blank schema. Under that, I will create a metadata repository. So as I said, for our training standpoint, I'm going to use Microsoft Access as my database. So let's first create a blank database. That's the first step. You need a blank schema. So I'll go to Access database. Okay, so I'm using Microsoft Access database, and I will say blank database. Now in case you're using Oracle or some other relational databases, you just need a blank schema database. That's it. So I will say blank database. I will select the location where I want to save it. I guess I'll just save it over here itself, and I will give the name as MSTR metadata August 2018. Okay, I'll say create, and that's it. You can see over here it's a complete blank database. We are not creating any table as such as of now. It's just a blank database. So my first step is my blank database should be ready. The second thing that you need to do is after this, I need to create one Odbc. I have this blank database ready. In order, as I said, in order that your MicroStrategy to connect or to talk with the database, it has to go through via Odbc. So within your Windows machine, you can simply write in Odbc, and you will see two options: Odbc data source is 32-bit, Odbc data source is 64-bit. Depending upon the type of database, you have to select it, either it's 32-bit or 64-bit. If you're using Microsoft Access, it's going to be 32-bit. If you're using, let's say, SQL Server, it's going to be 64-bit, and so on. So depending upon the type of database, so what kind of configuration that it needs, you can select the corresponding Odbc data sources. So I'm going to select Odbc data sources 32-bit, and under that, I will go to the system DSN, and over here we're going to create a new Odbc. So if I click on add, the first thing it is asking me what type of database you're using. Select the corresponding driver of it. Okay, so I'm using Microsoft Access. So I'm going to select Microsoft Access driver. So this driver are very important. In case you do not see your related database driver, you can definitely just go to the Microsoft site and install the one. Okay, so in case let's say I'm using SQL Server, I will select the SQL Server driver. So the every driver is specific to the type of database, and that driver is only needed because so that you can connect with your required database. Okay, so I'm going to select Microsoft Access driver. Let me come over here. Okay, I'm going to say finish. I'll just give some name of my ODBC. So let's say as MSTR metadata. Okay, and then I'm going to select the access file which I have just created it, so that my ODBC connection becomes successful. Okay, so I'm going to click on select. I'll go to that location, and this is the one, right? MSTR metadata 23rd August. This is the access file. So I'm going to click on OK. I'm going to click on OK, and if you look over here, this one, the one which I have selected, this is the one where my metadata is configured successfully. Not metadata, I mean to say ODBC. I'll take a pause over here. Any questions so far, please?
Yeah, no questions from me.
Oh, all right, thank you. Okay, so we have created one ODBC correctly. So now, as I can say, I have a blank database ready. I have ODBC ready. So now, in order to configure the metadata, we need to access one tool which comes, a tool component I would say, which comes along with your MicroStrategy, something called as configuration wizard. Now the configuration wizard is a MicroStrategy tool component, and when you install MicroStrategy, this component will be present along with it. So you can just go to the all programs MicroStrategy, or I can write configuration wizard. You can see configuration wizard over here. Click on configuration wizard. It will just take a few seconds over here to open up. Okay, and you can see it's welcome to MicroStrategy configuration wizard. That's the reason I said, right? It's a MicroStrategy tool component. Now, if you look over here, the first option which says create metadata, history list, and enterprise manager repository, and so on. Yes, as of now, I want to create the metadata. Don't worry about the history list and enterprise manager repository. That is something we will discuss later in our training. It's an advanced administration concepts, but still we will discuss in the later part of our training. As of now, I want to set up the environment and I'm only interested to create the metadata. I've selected that option. I'm going to click on next. I'm not worried about the history list and the other repositories. For now, I want a metadata. I'm going to say next. And now over here, under the DSN list, if you click on this particular drop down, you will see all the ODBCs that are present on your machine. And that is the only reason that first we created the ODBC and then came back to the configuration wizard instead of going the other way around. So I will search for the ODBC that we have created, which is MSTR metadata 23rd August 2018. And this is the ODBC which is connected to my required database under which I want to configure my metadata. So I've selected the correct DSN. I don't need ID and password, the username and password, because access file doesn't require any credential. But in case you're using other relational databases, It will ask you to enter the username and password. I'll click on next. It's trying to connect with my database, and once I click on finish, my metadata tables will be configured successfully. Now the question that comes in, how those tables have been created? By just clicking on finish. You can see a script file has been picked up by MicroStrategy automatically, and this is the script file which will be executed at the backend to get my metadata configured. Just for your reference, I will show you that script. Remember, the script is also a part of your installation. Okay, so when you install it, it creates a folder under program files. Okay, and under that, this all scripts will be present. MicroStrategy is intelligent enough to pick up the correct script based on the type of database that you're using it. All right, so if I come back to that location, now this is my location where my MicroStrategy files are installed. I'll go to the common files. For you, it would be C program files, common files, and then the MicroStrategy folder. Okay, so let me show you that script. I just scroll down. Yeah, over here. Okay, so the one that starts with MD. Okay, so the one that I've highlighted over here. Okay, all the file names that starts with MD, those are one which are used for metadata creation. Now depending upon the type of database that you're using, automatically it will pick up the just a second please. Okay, so these are all the scripts which are required for the metadata. And now depending upon the type of database, MicroStrategy is intelligent enough to pick up the corresponding script. We are using access database, correct? It will automatically pick up MDACC, that is metadata for access database. If you're using, let's say, Teradata, it will automatically pick up this file, which is metadata for Teradata database. So there are some scripts which would be common within the database, so that will be picked up automatically. And in case it's not, it will select the correct one. So if I show you this particular one, which will be executed for our case, and you will see that it will have all the create table statements. You can see it's all create table statements. At no point of time you're going to make any change to this particular script. This is just for your reference to understand as to how my metadata is configured, how my repository has been configured. So if I go back to the configuration wizard and if I click on finish, it is exactly that script file which I have shown you, right? It gets executed, and that's the reason my metadata has been configured. Okay, so it will take around one less than a minute. So let's just wait over here. Just taking some time. All right, and as we can see over here, the configuration is completed. If I go and show you the access file, correct? Let me see that access file over here. And if I open this access file now, you can see on the left hand side, all the DSS tables have been created now. Though the majority of the tables are going to be blank, because we have still not started working on this environment. But definitely you can see on the left hand side, there are a lot of tables that have been created already. These are all metadata related my tables. You're not going to do any manual updates on these tables. You're not going to write any query. This is just for your reference to understand how the metadata repository looks like. So these are the tables that have been created, and whenever you start working on MicroStrategy, all its corresponding information definition will be getting recorded automatically over here. That's something our internal talking, which will be done by MicroStrategy. I'll take a pause over here. Any question, please, so far? So as of now, we have discussed as to how to configure the metadata. The next few things that we're going to discuss is how to create a server and how to create the project sources and projects and so on. But before we go ahead and discuss on those things, any question over here, please?
From me, no questions. Sumeet.
All right, thank you, Kalyan. Prabhu, in case you have anything, feel free to shoot up your queries. I think we can't hear you, Prabhu, but that's okay. In case you have any question, you can even type in under the chat window. Seems your mic is not working, but in case you have any questions, feel free to ping me. All right, now we have the metadata configuration in place, correct? The next thing that we need to understand is how I can configure my server. And whenever we say server in MicroStrategy, it is always referred as iServer, which is intelligence server. That's the name, MicroStrategy Intelligence Server. Now, when we say that I want to configure the MicroStrategy Intelligence Server, it means it has to point to the required metadata. Configuring of iServer means pointing to the required metadata. Fair enough. So now we have created the blank metadata. And now if I say I want to configure my server, I simply mean that I want my server, which is present on this particular machine, to be pointing to the new metadata that we have created. And again, in order to configure the server, you have to again go back to your MicroStrategy configuration wizard. And you can definitely see the second option available now is configuring intelligence server. So I'll click on this configure intelligence server. I'll click on next, and you have to select that corresponding DSN, the DSN under which my metadata is already configured. You cannot go other way around. You cannot first create the configure the server and then create the metadata. Not possible. Configuration of iServer will happen only on the repository where metadata is already present. Okay, so I will select the same Odbc, which is MSTR metadata 23rd August 2018, correct? Because this is the one under which my metadata is created. I'll click on next. This is just a warning. I'll say yes, and this window will be popped up to enter the credential. Now remember, whenever you are accessing the metadata for the first time, I would say the default credential is always the ID as administrator and just the blank password, no password. You can see the note is already present. If this is the first time you're connecting to the MicroStrategy Intelligence server, use the username as administrator without a password. Okay, I can click on next. Now, for some reason, it's only issue with my installation or my laptop. It says my server is already configured. The definition already exists, and it's not giving me an option to override that. For some reason, because some DLL files have got corrupted. But the same thing when you but the same thing that when you try to join from your sorry, I think there's some problem with the meeting. Once again, the organizer has went offline. Just a second. Okay, I think they would join back. All right. So this is only issue with my laptop, but in case when you try to configure the server under your machine, you will not see any kind of such error. Okay, trust me. So when you click on next, it will ask you to give a server name. That is the name by which you're going to call your server. The name could be anything. It could be your name, it could be your laptop name, it could be your organization name, whatever name that you want to give to your server by which it has to get recognized. So when I click on next, it will not give me in that particular option, because as I said, some DLL files have got corrupted. I have to sit back and clear all those things. So it says the data source exists already. It says, okay, the server is configured and we cannot do a reconfiguration unless and until I just delete everything and install it back or something like that. But I would say, okay, no problem. But in case when you're trying to do it from your end, it will ask you in the next step, it will ask you to give a server name. And once you give that server name, you can just simply click on finish. Your iServer would be configured successfully. And when we say iServer would be configured successfully, it is now pointing to the required metadata. So if I show you, my iServer is already configured, I can go to the service manager. Now service manager is also a component of MicroStrategy, similar to configuration wizard. Okay, let me just show you that first thing, and before I take a pause. Okay, so you can see the machine, this particular name is something that has been given to my MicroStrategy intelligence server, and you can see the status is running. Okay, so when you click on the next step under this particular window, it will ask you to define your server name, and in my case this is the server name that I had given earlier. Okay, so give that server name, click on finish. Okay, and your iServer would be configured successfully. I'll take a pause over here. Any question, please?
No, I'm good.
All right, sure. All right, sure, thank you. So now I can say that my iServer is configured successfully. What would be the next step? The next step is to understand how I can configure my project source. A project source is an direct or indirect connection to my metadata. Now remember one thing. You forget about MicroStrategy. Take any a general concept over here. You need three different environments. For example, like you're working for a client, and that client has three different environments. They have dev environment, they have test environment, and they have a production environment. Correct? So in order to set up the environment in MicroStrategy, we call it as project source, which is directly or indirectly connected to metadata. Okay, so when I say directly or indirectly connected, directly means it will be directly a local installation, which we call it as two tier. Sorry, which we call it as two tier, which means my project source is directly connected to metadata, and it's not a shareable. It's everything is local to my machine. I have metadata sitting on my laptop. I have MicroStrategy sitting on my laptop, and the project source is connected to the required metadata, and it's a non-shareable environment. No third person can access it. In real-time scenario, in a real-time project, it will be connected using three-tier option. When I say three-tier option, okay, my project source will be connected to my MicroStrategy intelligence server, and intelligence server is something which is already pointing to the required metadata. Now this is a real-time scenario. This would be the case in every client project that you would be working. So my project source is connecting to the server, and server under which is already configured to use my metadata. Okay, so one we call it as two tier, other is called as three tier. Three tier means when we use a server, the other person can access as well, the folks who are in one domain. Okay, so now let's see how I can configure my project sources in both the connection mode. And in order to create the project sources, you have to access one interface tool called as Microstrategy Developer. I think this is something I have told you in the earlier introduction call as well. MicroStrategy Developer Tool Interface, the one that you're seeing on your screen right now, is the place where majority of the architect and development work happens, and even some portion of administration. So on the left hand side, the folder list that you see, those are all called as project sources. Okay, so I'm going to create a project source. I'm going to create both the project sources, 2 tier and 3 tier, and then we will see how the connection has been made. So in order to create a new project source over here, I'll just right click and I would say new project source. I'll click on new project source. I'll just first give some name as 2 tier admin, and under the connection mode I have both the option direct and server. So if I click on direct, it was directly asking me to select the required Odbc. So I'm going to select MSTR metadata 23rd August, correct? So this is a direct connection, and I have directly selected the Odbc which is present on my laptop, and I will click on OK. That's it. So my new project source will be created successfully. Similarly, I can create one more project source. I'll just right click and say new project source. I'll give some name over here, and now you can see when I try to make a connection using a server, I have to give the server name. And remember, this is the server name that you would have defined while configuring the server via configuration wizard. As I have shown you, this is my server name, right? So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to paste over here, and I would say okay. So even now my 3-tier project source has been configured successfully. So as of now, this is an initial connection where my one kind of an environment, let's say dev environment, is pointing to the dev metadata, maybe directly or via server. So now if I try to log in, as I've told you, by default the credentials are administrator without a password. My connection would be successful, and it will just say that no projects are present, because as of now we have not created any project to connect to the required warehouse. But as of now I can say that my project source are been configured correctly. I'll take a pause over here. Does this make sense, guys? So the next step and the last step, which we're going to discuss in the next call, not today, is to understand how I can create my first project, and this project needs to connect to the required data warehouse so that the developer can start working on that particular project. But this is something I will show you in the next call. Any question with any of the things that we have discussed in today's call, please? No questions? All right. So I would say we will just stop over here for today. Let's connect back in next call, and we will see how I can create a project, how I can connect to my warehouse. All right. So thank you so much for joining in, and let's connect back in next call. All right, guys.
Thank you, Banish.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.